to start with, he is drawing from a conception of a Christianity that's moving beyond the particulars of doctrine, right? Particular doctrinal claims, and more to the level of sort of statements of truth. Something like the resurrection as a non-historical reality, but that really what it ultimately is, the resurrection in its fullness, is the principle that all of life shall be redeemed and resurrected, right? So that there's a rationalism that the resurrection in all of its supernatural weirdness has to be dismissed, and what's left behind is philosophy adjudicates what's really rational about the resurrection. And this comes to be linked then also to what the church is, right? So the church is not the gathering of those who are solely interested in salvation. The church becomes the community of those who gather the social entity that passes on this religiosity, that lives it out, and the overly superstitious dimensions of religion have to disappear. And that actually, later Dewey, when he goes to the University of Chicago and takes up a philosophy position and starts up a school that does workshop, that's really sort of the first workshop school, a kind of space that was designed to teach kids. He leaves religion behind for years, for the most part, in his own thinking, until he returns only later in his art as experience and his common faith, so that faith becomes more, the particulars of Christian faith were simply a preparation for the faith of America. This faith in a democratic principle that if we all worked together well and came together well and engaged in common inquiry together, then human beings could become one, right? So there was this, we could make a better world. And this is the real faith of America. This is what Christianity has always been leading to. And dogmatism, particular doctrines are to be left behind for what's authentic, which is this movement ever higher and higher towards unity, towards oneness.
All right, so if I heard you correctly, Dewey himself was raised in a religious household, was affiliated for a time as a Congregationalist, worked in a Congregationalist environment, but then left behind religion, only to rediscover it later because of his interest in perhaps art. But when he talks about religion in his book, A Common Faith, which is perhaps less widely read than his works on education, he says pretty clearly, really unequivocally, that he's reached the conclusion that any of the supernatural claims about religion are untrue, and that what we need to keep are the values that arise from religion, but not the doctrines and not the creeds. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. And so what's left behind is this kind of principle of philosophical wisdom that religion teaches, that religion teaches you to be contemplative, to pay attention to things. It has a wisdom and a morality to it that's worth attending to. In essence, Dewey is not unique on this. I mean, he's simply taken up the modern critique and sort of understanding of religion, what Hans Urs von Balthasar calls in the kind of cosmological reduction, where what's all that's left is these sort of universal truths that would have been accessible to reason unto itself. And so he's taken that up and he's followed it through to his end.
Okay, so Dewey was not really unlike a lot of other philosophers of modernity who saw something good in religion in the name of the values that it promoted and the ideas of justice and care for the poor. But he's pretty clear that this claim that there is a transcendent God who became man and resurrected from the dead, like that's really not true for Dewey. And he says that the problem is, he even calls it an illusion, a projection, right? And he tries to explain the persistence of these supernatural beliefs or creeds as a human psychological projection, right? God and these rituals and beliefs are a projection of human psychology. And if we were to know and apply his method of education and his view of democracy, we would no longer need to have these transcendent supernatural beliefs in order to have the values and the justice and the equality. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, the society that progresses no longer needs them, right? It had a role, it served its purpose, and now we've come to this new era where we leave behind the institution and the particulars of doctrine for what comes ahead. And that's this, of course, is the great temptation of modern sort of philosophical interpretation of religious doctrine as a whole, right? It claims nothing beyond truth that can be left behind, and now let's move ahead. And so, but of course, this proves to be one, untrue, one, people still believe these things, and they believe them not simply as illusions. So that's the problem that Dewey has to deal with. And two, it is a desire to rationalize religious faith, to rationalize everything, an over-rationalization. I think, Dewey is friends with William James, and they sort of operate within a kind of pragmatism. Think about the varieties of religious experience by William James. Could a mystical thing be real? Well, yes, but its realness is psychological, right? You have to understand it in a mode of something that finds it acceptable according to that which is rational, and it can't exist unto itself as a mystery to be encountered, as something that reason alone, or at least a kind of scientific reason, cannot fully grasp.